behind the long hair and lava lamps, people were pulling cons, bending rules, and dreaming up schemes that ranged from daring to downright dangerous. Draft dodgers found loopholes, pranksters hacked telephones, and hustlers figured out how to squeeze a few extra miles or dollars out of almost anything. Some got rich, some got caught, and others became legends. In this video, we'll uncover the tricks that defined a slick generation. The Baby-Faced Bamboozler. You've probably heard the phrase "fake it till you make it." Well, Frank Abagnale practically turned it into a career. Most of his antics took place in the 1960s, but it wasn't until the late 70s that he became widely known as America's favorite con man. And unlike the petty hustlers of the era, Abagnale made the art of the con look downright entertaining. By sheer charm and quick thinking, he managed to pose as an airline pilot, rent cars, talk his way into hospital scrubs as a pediatrician, and even bluff his way into courtrooms as a lawyer. He also cashed more than 17,000 bogus checks. By the time the law caught up with him, he'd swindled banks and businesses out of millions, all without the benefit of the internet or Photoshop. What makes you wonder, how on earth did he pull that off? After serving time in the early 70s, he rebranded himself as a security consultant, later penning his autobiography, Catch Me If You Can, in 1980. In 2002, Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks brought his cat and mouse story to the big screen.
I'll be choosing 8 young ladies to be a part of Pan Am's future stewardess program.
Uncle who? With the Vietnam War raging, young Americans faced the draft, and many got creative about not serving. Draft dodging wasn't just one trick, but a whole toolbox of schemes. Some enrolled in college, suddenly everyone loved night school, while others claimed medical exemptions for everything from poor eyesight to suspiciously convenient asthma. A few memorized psychiatric manuals well enough to flunk mental health exams, and others simply vanished across the border into Canada. Many resisted the conscription and publicly burned their draft cards. Dodging meant risk, stigma, and sometimes exile. The penalty was jail, but it was common enough to become part of the era's folklore. The impact was profound. It fueled generational divides, shaped politics, and left countless dinner tables divided. As many as over 500,000 young men were classified as draft offenders. Over 200,000 were formally accused of draft violations. However, only 8,750 got convicted and only 3,250 were jailed. It wasn't until 1977 that Jimmy Carter became president and unconditionally pardoned anyone who dodged the draft.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some poor hungry people in the mud for big powerful America.
Whistlin Ma Bell. Phone phreaking was the underground art of manipulating the telephone system to make free calls or explore the network. Calling long distance was expensive. A domestic coast-to-coast call could cost 40 to 50 cents a minute. Let's not even talk about international calling. It emerged in the US during the late 1960s and peaked in the 70s, pioneered by hackers like John Captain Crunch Draper, who discovered that a toy whistle from a cereal box could mimic the 2600 Hz tone used by AT&T to control long-distance switching. By generating these tones using whistles, blue boxes, or homemade electronics, phreakers could trick the phone system into routing calls for free. It worked on both home phones and payphones, making it accessible to curious tinkerers. While not widespread among the general public, it gained a cult following among hackers, engineers, and counterculture techies. Not everyone could pull it off. It required a mix of nerve and skill, but those who did felt like they'd peeked behind the curtain. The phone companies, of course, were not amused, and by the early 80s, they had the last laugh with digital switching.
If you had perfect pitch like blind phone freak Joe and Grecia, you could whistle calls through the network.
Let's see if I make it this time.
Yakety Gas. With oil crises and gas prices spiking, lines at the pumps stretched for miles, and some folks got creative when getting gas. Stealing gasoline became sort of a dark art, practiced everywhere from suburban driveways to crowded filling stations by desperate individuals. The most notorious trick was siphoning, a rubber hose, a willing thief, and a strong stomach to avoid inhaling more than fumes. But that was only the beginning. With odd even rationing days, your license plate decided when you could buy gas. The workaround? Swap plates with a neighbor or find a loose plate at the junkyard, and suddenly Tuesday becomes your lucky day. Some folks even slipped a few bills to attendants who forgot the rules and topped off a tank or a hidden jerry can. Others went bold, flashing fake business credentials to tap commercial pumps that had looser restrictions. For honest drivers, waiting in endless lines while others gained the system was maddening. Gasoline became kind of a currency, and people went to surprising lengths just to keep their engines running.
Is that enough?
Hey, don't start racing.
Creative accounting. Creative accounting wasn't just a shady trick, it was practically a hobby. Before the IRS went digital, slipping past the tax man felt less like a crime and more like a gentleman's game. From Park Avenue penthouses to small-town barber chairs, everyone seemed to know somebody who was working the numbers. The wealthy shuffled fortunes through the Cayman Island shell companies, claimed racehorses as farm losses, and bought into oil wells that produced more write-offs than crude. Local businesses played along too. Diners that never seemed to make a profit or mom-and-pop shops where half the payroll was under the table. Some schemes were elaborate, requiring lawyers and offshore trusts. Others were nothing more than a shoebox ledger that made auditors groan. Billions were lost, while those in the know bragged about their phantom cattle or invisible investments over cocktails. For the rich, it was expected. For the bold, it was tempting. Eventually, computers, stricter laws, and international crackdowns spoiled the fun.
You take a tax deduction on interest payments that you don't even make. Am I an innovator? Am I a genius?
Milking the system. Before EBT cards and magnetic strips, food stamps were literal stamps. Colorful paper currency ripe for creative entrepreneurship. In the 70s and 80s, the shadow economy flourished where recipients sold stamps at 50 cents on the dollar outside grocery stores, trading government cheese for cold cash. Store owners sometimes joined the party, accepting stamps for non-food items or providing change in real money. The methods were charmingly analog. Duplicate applications using different addresses, selling bennies to neighbors, or the classic corner store shuffle where stamps bought cigarettes and beer. Small towns and inner cities alike witnessed these transactions without batting an eye. It's no wonder taxpayers are skeptical of a system filled with abuses and question whether it really helps the people in need.
Assistance program has people online bragging about the amount of food that they are getting, mostly junk food.
Hacking the machines. Coin-operated machines were everywhere, whether it was getting a snack and a pop or washing your bell-bottoms or maybe swallowing your quarters at the arcade. There were clever and determined tinkerers trying to outsmart these mechanical sitting ducks. Hacking these machines took many forms. How about coin on a string fashioned with a fishing line, shaving down slugs, foreign coins, and washers to mimic nickels or quarters, jamming payphones so they could spit back change, or feeding more slugs into subway turnstiles to get a free ride? It wasn't always high-tech. Sometimes it was just persistence and a little nerve. These exploits were pretty common in dormitories and public places with high foot traffic. Although we can't substantiate the impact on businesses, it was enough for manufacturers to respond with more sophisticated security measures, such as anti-slug sensors and redesigned slots, even calling them anti-string coin selectors. You might have heard an urban legend about a kid who never paid for a Coke. For a brief, mischievous moment, some people truly lived on pocket change without ever spending it.
Will the coin on the fishing line work? Wait, no way! It actually came back.
Got tickets? Ticket scalping, especially for rock concerts, has been pure street theater for decades. Picture guys in trench coats outside Madison Square Garden for a Kiss concert back in '77 whispering, "Got tickets?" like they were peddling state secrets. They bought tickets at face value from the record store or had inside help from an employee, creating scarcity, and then sold them at high prices for desperate fans at the venue. Scalpers haunted every major venue: concert halls, sports stadiums, Broadway theaters, armed with cash connections and zero shame. They'd camp out at box offices, befriend ticket sellers, or deploy small armies of buyers. The ambitious ones had ins with venue employees. Sure, it was technically illegal in most places, but enforcement was spotty. Fans paid through the nose, artists got nothing extra, and scalpers drove Buicks. Today, the circus moved online to Ticketmaster, StubHub, and SeatGeek. Not related to ticket scalping, you've always heard someone with a fond memory of sneaking into a concert? Were you one of them? Let us know in the comments.
No, I need tickets, guys. Tickets. I bought this for 20, so I'm gonna try to sell it for 50 or 60.
Flying a check. Before instant banking and electronic transfers, there was a little loophole ripe for mischief called check kiting. It worked like this. You wrote a check from one bank account that didn't have enough money, deposited it into another, and then quickly withdrew the funds before the first bank realized the account was emptier than a disco at noon. Nothing was holding up the checks but air. Get it? The scheme existed well before the 70s, but the 70s were favorable for check kiting because the banking system was sophisticated enough to handle large volumes of checks, but primitive enough that electronic verification didn't exist, as checks had to be manually handled and reconciled, and that took days, especially if the checks were out of state. With time on their side, people kited checks to float themselves through tough weeks, cover debts, or in some cases, pull off outright fraud. It wasn't just shady operators. Sometimes it was just regular folks trying to stretch a paycheck to look fly on a Friday night. Banks lost money and eventually cracked down with faster clearing systems.
I'm sorry to have to tell you, your son is fudging checks.
I have a payroll check here I'd like to cash.
I'm working part-time at the church now. Just tell me how much yours and I'll pay you back.
$1.3 million.
Knuckle-Busters. Before taps and chips, credit cards ran through those bulky metal imprinting machines, Knuckle-Busters. You might remember them if you worked in retail. Raised numbers on credit cards, and each purchase left behind a carbon paper copy, and that's where the mischief began. Dishonest clerks might make an extra imprint to pocket for later, but some scammers went a step further, dumpster diving behind scores to scoop up discarded carbon slips. With your whole card number in hand, they could order goods, rack up charges, or even sell the info to others. Since billing cycles ran on paper and snail mail, weeks might pass before you realized your splurge at a department store you never set foot in. It wasn't exactly widespread, but it happened often enough to keep the banks nervous. Victims suffered from stolen purchases, shaken trust, and a lot of awkward calls to the credit card company trying to clear their name. Turn the meter around. Busting miles, or clocking, as it was known in the UK and Canada, was one of those tricks that gave used car lots their shady reputation, and plenty of punchlines. The game was simple: make a car look barely broken in when in reality it had already toured half the country. Shifty dealers and the occasional crafty private seller would roll back those little mechanical numbers with a tool, disconnect the cable so the miles stopped ticking, or even swap in a low-mileage odometer from a junkyard special. Buyers, lured by promises of only driven to church on Sundays, often found themselves saddled with worn-out clunkers that needed repairs faster than you could say, "as is, no warranty." It wasn't exactly a do-it-yourself project for your average Joe, but being sold a lemon was common enough to become a running joke. By the early 70s, lawmakers stepped in, making odometer fraud illegal, though for many, the damage had already been done.
You can take a pry tool and you can literally change these numbers without taking it apart.
Breaker 19. Before smartphones and GPS, truckers and everyday drivers wielded CB radios like rebels with a cause. The ritual was beautifully simple. Spot a Smokey Bear, that's a cop with a radar gun, grab that microphone and broadcast Breaker 19, got a bear in the bushes at mile marker 47 eastbound. Within minutes, dozens of drivers would ease off the gas, transforming potential tickets into grateful waves. It wasn't just about avoiding fines. It was American camaraderie on wheels. Truckers led the charge, but suburban dads and station wagons quickly joined the resistance. Anyone with a $50 radio and a basic sense of courtesy could participate in this democratic rebellion. CB radios made handing out speeding tickets plummet, so the cops had to change their tactics in this game of cat and mouse.
16 in the middle there, westbound. That means there's a cop at the 16-mile marker in the middle of the highway. That means he has radar, and if you don't slow down, you're getting a ticket.
Enter how many times? Fast food chains were hooked on gimmicks to lure customers. Raffles, scratch-offs, and contests promising big prizes. In 1975, McDonald's launched a Southern California sweepstakes with one fateful phrase: enter as often as you wish. To most, it was harmless. To 3 clever Caltech students, it was an open invitation. Armed with Caltech's IBM mainframe, the trio cranked out nearly 1.2 million perfectly sized entry slips, distributing them on behalf of 26 dorm mates. On the contest's final day, they fanned out across 98 McDonald's locations, stuffing boxes full of computer-generated hopes and dreams. McDonald's, cornered by their own rules, reluctantly honored the entries, but scrambled to hold duplicate drawings, one excluding the Caltech participants. Even so, the students snagged about 20% of the 50 grand in prizes, including a shiny Datsun station wagon and thousands of McDonald's food vouchers. The stunt made headlines, sparking debate. Was it cheating or brilliant rule following? The students cheekily donated the car to charity, proving they could outsmart the system and still keep their reputation intact.
McDonald's $1 million menu song and menu song food coupons in this week's paper.
There you have it. Did we miss any? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, watch another one. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this one next.